Hello, it's Para here. With me finally beating my first playthrough of Elden Ring with 90 hours clocked in, I started to delve into the PvP scene. How good is the PvP? Is there any reason to do the PvP, and will it have any long-lasting stay in its current state? Now, this is coming from the eyes of a player who's got hundreds of hours of PvP in every Dark Souls. I think I must have around 800 hours in Dark Souls 3. That's primarily PvP alone, so I'd like to think I know a little bit what I'm talking about. So, how is Elden Ring PvP? PvP has always been a second thought in these games, as obviously and unapologetically, the main focus of the game should be its single player experience. Weapon balance, spell damage, and items should realistically be tailored towards just that. But PvP, dueling, and invasions are all a part of the game, which a good portion of the player base participate in. There's still around 2,000 active people on Dark Souls 2 on the PC, and 15,000 on Dark Souls 3. Now, that's not to say that they're all there for the PvP, but you'd bet a good portion are, and with nearly 900,000 concurrent players on the PC alone, Elden Ring is opening its gates for new players to become potential PvPers. But should they? Is there any reason to? Incentive is a key thing in this topic. Previously, in Souls games, there would be spells and or items that were locked behind Covenant progression. In Dark Souls 2, they took that a step further and introduced a cosmetic reward, which made your chosen hue, red or blue, glow a little bit brighter, the more kills you had acquired. This system was unfortunately dropped in Dark Souls 3, and that still, honestly, pains me to this day. So what incentive do Elden Ring players have to PvP? If you win, you get a rune arc and a percentage of the host's souls. And that's it. There's no PvP factions. Well, there is, but we'll get to that. And thus there's no progression. There really isn't any reason to do PvP other than fun, which unfortunately isn't going to be enticing enough for most players, and isn't really going to have the staying power for the PvP community. Right now, there's two methods of PvP. Dueling, which is a 1v1, and invasions. Now, invasions are interesting, as they're more akin to Dark Souls 3. In Dark Souls 3, you had to be embered to enable invasions, and usually people embered so they could open up the summoning pool and start getting co-opers into their world. And this usually meant, more than likely, in an invasion situation, you had the odds stacked against you. You would normally have the host and a buddy or two helping them. In Elden Ring, however, there is no system like that as far as I'm aware, unless you account for the summoning pool statues, but I'm not sure you can invade the world of a solo host. From 8 hours of invasions I've done, I've not invaded a solo player a single time. Now obviously if you have, please let me know. Misinformation. Hello, Future Para here. After writing this script, I went to go invade to get some footage for this video, and I actually did end up getting a few solo ones, but they were all around the summoning effigies. So my guess is if you activate one of those effigies, it will open up your world to invasions, regardless if you have a co-op partner or not. Anyway, back to the video. But this correlates into my own playthrough. I beat the game in around 80 hours, completely solo, always online, and I didn't get invaded once. Now, is that a problem? Well, yes and no. It ties back into the incentive. Invasions are tough, as they should be. You're going into another person's game and you're trying to halt their progress, but you don't get anything for it. There's nothing really to work for. So what's the point? If you were telling a potential new player to PvP, you'll go into someone else's world, it's going to be really difficult, it's going to be kinda laggy, and there's going to be multiple opponents, and if you die, you lose your souls where you died in their world? Oh, okay, the new player will probably say. Well, why would I do that? Do I get anything? Well, it can be fun sometimes, and no, you don't really get anything. Oh, well, I guess I won't bother then. Going back to factions, the game actually has the perfect faction already in place, the Volcano Manor. Part of that questline is you go and invade other NPCs' worlds in sort of a pseudo offline PvP-esque environment. Now obviously Elden Ring isn't a live service game, so I don't see them adding things or entirely new systems, but I could have totally seen the Volcano Manor being the invader hub, and was actually quite surprised it wasn't. Now regarding balance, things hit really hard in PvP, and there is currently an absolutely disgusting build regarding Curse, which I refuse to show, and I know some other PvP YouTubers have already made a video on it, and goddamn you. I'd argue it's even more disgusting than the one I'm currently using here, but this one is still incredibly broken and I feel dirty every single time. In a group PvP environment in Dark Souls 3, the majority of the time, not all of the time, it was about the battle of attrition, whittling your opponents down in the best way possible. Yes, there were one-shot mechanics if you had the right setup, but in Elden Ring, a lot of that PvP revolves around one-shotting or doing as much damage in a single hit as possible. Your Ashes of War, if they land, can be extremely powerful, but this is a really good thing. Weapon arts in Dark Souls 3, some of them were really cool looking, but lacked on actual usefulness or were just plain weak. In this clip here, you can actually see me using a very late game weapon, and a lot of the time, if I hit, if being the key word here, I one-shot them. Now, that's obviously because in a PvE scenario, these weapon ashes are designed to do big damage, but it really doesn't translate that well over into the PvP scene. At least some of them don't translate well, and maybe that's the point. Not everything should be viable, but maybe giving players natural resistance to other players' abilities would be a start. But that's just one potential suggestion in a sea of hundreds. I would like to see more Ashes of War being used, because right now we're kind of seeing the same thing already. So if I had a direct line to FromSoftware, what would I recommend? I would have a look at incentivizing player versus player. Look at rewards you can give the player for taking part in it. Cosmetic items for torrents, armors and weapons. Bring back the glow. Maybe a rune cluster when you win, because right now we really get nothing. Having unique items tied to that faction that can only be obtained through PvP would be a start. It's been present in Dark Souls, so I don't see why it can't happen here. This ties into the blue cipher ring, where you'll get summoned as a blue phantom to help the host kill a red invader. Again, there's no real reason to do this, and getting summoned for them is few and far between anyway. I think balancing stuff has always been complicated in Souls games. There's already incredibly overpowered weapons and spells, and when you see them you instantly know this is going to be an uphill struggle. But with that said, if someone feels powerful in PvE, you don't really want to take that away from them in a PvP scenario. Now, there's obviously exceptions. For example, towards the end of the game, I started using the Blasphemous Sword, and it made the game so easy due to the Ash of War. But landing that in PvP is incredibly difficult, unless I get the jump on someone, or free aim it, or I punish a heal. So I go from absolutely destroying in PvE with a very simple move, to having to completely reevaluate how I use said weapon whilst fighting a player. But this in turn can actually be quite fun. Finding out what works and what doesn't is all a part of the PvP experience. And not everything you use can work, nor should it, like we said before. With that said, we're at the beginning of the game's life. It's very common for FromSoftware to take a month or so to look at the masses and make changes accordingly and fix major bugs. For example, arcane weapons, if you get them to +9, they just stop scaling. There's invisible summons or nerfing raw damage on certain attacks. One of the absolute biggest gripes I have with Invasions aren't actually the fact that it's a gankfest. I thoroughly enjoy that, if I'm honest. It's actually where you spawn. When you enter a host world, you'll spawn in a set amount of pre-allocated locations that are determined by the host's location. In Legacy Dungeons, this is fine as it functions in a very similar way to Dark Souls. Compared to the open world, these Legacy Dungeons are linear, so you'll normally spawn further into the map from the host, and the host will have to go through you to progress. Now, in the open world, the spawns are all over the place. You'll spawn on cliff edges or in ravines, and it'll take you a good while for you to run up to the host. Now, there's even a spawn in Khalid where you literally can't reach the host. It's actually physically impossible to do so. So, open world spawns need to change drastically. Spawn an invader nearer the host, just like NPC invasions work. They're perfect. Another problem I've seen people talk about is player levels and scaling. Now, usually you can only invade players that are within a certain bracket. Let's say, hypothetically, you're level 80, you'll only be able to invade those who are level 70 to 90. I'm obviously pulling those numbers out of thin air, but you get the point. Weapon level also comes into the equation, I think. I think it works great in Dark Souls where you're going through an area in a somewhat structured manner, but in Elden Ring, it really doesn't translate well at all, especially in the open world. In the Legacy Dungeons, you can kind of get away with it, but I'm level 120 with a max level weapon, and I still get invasions in the open world, but they take substantially longer, sometimes up to 10 minutes, than if I were to invade someone in the later sections of the game in a Legacy Dungeon. And weapon levels, if they do have an effect, can really mess up your invasions. For example, if you had a, let's say, +3 weapon, and you kill one of the bosses that drops a +7, congratulations, you're now in a completely different pool of players, despite you not using that weapon potentially. Now, this is coming from a longevity mindset, and I really feel that open world invasions can be some of the most fun you can have in the online side of this game. But how do we get more players doing it? Well, an idea could be scaling. Now, there is a scaling system already in Elden Ring, albeit it is a bit odd and finicky. But if I'm level 120, should I be able to invade, let's say, a level 40 and be scaled down and have my weapon level reflect the same as the host's? I don't see a problem with that if that gets me in games quicker. You invade someone and that person's highest upgraded weapon is a +4, okay, now you also have a +4 or the somber equivalent. This way it opens up the pool of players further and gets people into the game. Now obviously that comes with its own issues such as spoilers for one. Right now I'm using a weapon you get from the last boss, and I don't really want to use it on someone that's, let's say, just a few hours in. That's not really fair. Because yes, invasions are all about halting someone's progression, but I don't want to ruin their overall experience and potentially spoil something and ruin their time with the game. Another thing I would have liked is the addition of an area that's dedicated to PvP. Think of the bell towers in Dark Souls 2 or the area after the Pontiff in Dark Souls 3 for literally no other reason than I like them. To sum it up, PvP in Elden Ring needs a bit of tender love and care. Yes, the foundation is there, but we've had systems in the past, and I'm mainly looking at Dark Souls 2, which worked. Soul Memory did not work, just FYI before you type that in the comments. But it is a shame that this game is lacking in that department. With so many, and I mean so many things going for it in its single player experience, I really hope that PvP would have been at least a step forward in the right direction, but it is looking like it's taken a few steps back in some areas. And I hope things improve with DLCs down the line, but for now I'm going to stick with it, find a build I like invading with, and carry on. It's still the early days yet in the grand scheme of things, so there's information flying everywhere and I'm discovering new things about the game every day along the way, which is absolutely fantastic. Speaking of, we're going to be running community fight clubs, which will have a integrated leaderboard that we're working on, and will eventually have real life prizes attached to them as well. If you want to flex and prove you're the best of the best, in duels, join the Discord server, and catch a live stream when we start doing these things. If you liked today's discussion, remember to leave a like on the video and share some of your thoughts on the state of PvP, as it will help spread the video around and get more eyes on the channel. I've been It's Para, take care, be good to one another, and I'll see you next time.